into this video. Now, in the last video, we stopped at this point, all right? We couldn't connect to the Docker daemon, all right, on our runner, okay? We got this error. Now, how do you resolve, all right, this error? Now, if you look at our pipeline, basically, okay? Now, here, we actually specified some Docker commands, okay? Now, the fact that you're using a Docker executor does not mean you can, all right, start running Docker commands in your pipeline, right? Because the Docker executor that you're using will still have to leverage the Docker daemon, all right, that you have running on that runner. Okay, so basically the idea is that your Docker daemon, all right, and your Docker executor, all right, they work together. All right, your Docker executor writes on, all right, the Docker daemon that you have on your system, on the runner, basically. Okay, now it means that the Docker executor has to be able to communicate with the Docker, all right, daemon that you have installed on your system, right? So if that communication is not established, then you won't be able to run Docker commands within, all right, your pipeline. So how do we fix, all right, this issue? Now, what we need to do here is basically to go back, all right, to our runner. So here I'm going to go back to my runner. Now, one thing I want to show you is this. Now, when you install, all right, a GitLab runner on your server, now the GitLab runner also creates a user on that system, right? It creates a user, basically, more like, when you install Jenkins, for example, your Jenkins also creates a Jenkins user, all right, on that machine. Okay, and the Jenkins user, it is what Jenkins uses, all right, to build and to execute your pipeline. The same thing also applies here to the GitLab Runner. When you install a GitLab Runner, all right, it also creates a user, all right, on your system. I mean, if I do ID, all right, and then I say GitLab Runner, right, I can see that I have a user here, all right, that is called the GitLab Runner. Okay, that's the user. Now, this user should be able to execute Docker commands, all right? That's one thing that we need to know. Now, if I come here and I do, sudo, all right, sudo su, okay, GitLab runner, all right, and then I do Docker ps, for example. Now it's going to tell me that permission denied because, this user is not allowed, all right, to have access to the Docker socket. This is a Docker socket right here, var/Docker sock, right? So this user, even though it's a user on the system, right, does not have access to interact, all right, with the Docker socket. So what do we do? How do we solve that? Now let me exit out. Now, the way you can solve that is basically to do this, right? You can use this command. So sudo, all right, user mode, all right, -ag, which basically means you want to add a user to a group. So I am adding, all right, this particular user, so GitLab runner, right? I'm adding this user to the Docker group, okay? So that this user can execute Docker commands, right? So I'll do that. Okay, so now if I do sudo again, su, all right, I'm trying to log in as the GitLab runner now. Oh, sorry, GitLab runner. Okay, and then I do Docker ps. Now, this runner, all right, this runner user basically is able to now execute these Docker commands, right? Now, if you go ahead, all right, and execute your pipeline again, now, do you think this is going to work? Okay, now let's take a look at that. So if I go to the pipeline, for example, and then I just refresh this pipeline, basically I just retry, all right, this pipeline. So basically, okay, let's see. Okay, let's retry that particular job and see if it will work. We've done some kind of configuration now. All right, let's see if this works. Now look at that. It failed, all right, again. Okay, because it's telling us here that I can't connect to this socket. Basically, that's what the issue is. So how do you solve this? How? Now let's exit. Now what you can do is this. Now you can open up, all right, so do sudo vi/etc/gitlab runner, all right, /config .toml. Remember, that is where all your, GitLab Runner configuration resides, right? So let's open that up. Now, I'm going to come all the way here, all right, and then I'm going to scroll all the way down First of all, we need to enable this. Under this privilege, we need to set that to true. Okay, so that's the first thing. Let's do that. Okay, so true. And then under the volume, we need to put a volume here, all right, as well. Remember, I mentioned the fact that, all right, the Docker daemon has a socket. And if your GitLab user does not have access to that socket, all right, it won't be able to run Docker commands, right? Now, in addition to that socket, you need to also attach, all right, that socket URL or the socket path, all right, as a volume, okay, to your GitLab Runner configuration. That way, your GitLab Runner will be able, all right, to run Docker commands leveraging, all right, the Docker engine. So how do we do that? We just basically put comma here and then open up a new curly brace. So the path is var, all right, we saw that part earlier. So run/docker, okay, .sock, which is basically Docker socket. And then we're going to say colon, all right, var, all right, run/docker, all right, .soc, okay, SOCK, right? And then you close that up. So basically what we are doing here is that we are mapping the Docker socket, all right, of our Docker, engine that is running on our runner. We're mapping that to the socket, all right, inside of our Docker image, basically. So which means if you're running Docker commands, all right, using your Docker image within your GitLab pipeline, okay, so what you're saying basically is that your Docker image should leverage, all right, the Docker socket that is available on the runner. And that's why you're mapping it, all right, like this, okay? Because I mean, that Docker executor in itself cannot execute Docker commands. It has to use, all right, the Docker daemon, all right, that is already running on your runner. So what we're doing basically is connecting their two sockets together, which means if you have any Docker commands you want to execute, all right, you can leverage, all right, the socket that is already available on this runner, all right? So we're going to do that, and then we're going to save this. Okay, so let's just do git, all right, let's just do sudo, all right, systemctl, all right, systemctl restart, all right, restart GitLab runner. Okay, so let's restart the service, right? So now let's retry and let's see if this will pull through. All right. So let's restart and see if this is going to go through. So I'm going to retry, all right, that image, and let's see what happens now. All right. So the job is pending. All right. So let's wait for the job to get started. All right. So it's still in the pending state. Okay. So let's take a look at that. All right. Now look at what it says again here. All right. Now it says unable to find image network latest locally, right? Now look at something. We did Docker PS, okay? And that Docker PS command executed correctly, right? So you can see that now it has installed something here, right? So now we have a Docker, all right, image that is running on a runner already, right? I mean, with Docker PS, we can see that we have a container that is running already, okay? Now here we have these, Docker create network app. Now it is actually seeing this, all right, as an error because it's seeing this as an image, basically, all right, because I mean, that means that command is actually not correct. Okay, that command is not correct because it is seeing it as what, as an image. So here, if you look at it, it says network column latest. So basically, it's trying to pull a network latest image. I mean, there's no image like that. If there was an image like that, probably it will have pulled, all right, that image as well. Okay, but the mere fact that this works, all right, shows us basically that, all right, our Docker, executor is now able to interact with our Docker, all right, daemon that is running on our system. I mean, if I go back to my server and I say Docker PS, all right, I can actually see, sorry, if I do Docker PS, all right, I can see, oops, I'm executing that with my Ubuntu user, all right? So my Ubuntu user is not, it's not there yet. So I can just say sudo su, all right, GitLab Runner, all right, and then I do Docker PS, okay, I can see that I can't find anything right here, okay? So that tells you, okay, you can't see anything here, right? But look at the output here. We can see that a Docker container actually was started, right? That tells you that what happened basically was that, the Docker daemon actually that pulled an image, all right, from the Docker hub. It used that image to run, all right, our job. And then after the job was done, it basically just discarded, all right, the container. That is what happens, right? So basically what we're trying to do now is that the job does not execute directly on the runner itself. Every job that we run will basically run inside of a Docker container. And once the job is done, the container is basically discarded, right? So, I mean, if I come here now and I say Docker images, let's see if we have any images right now. There you go. Look at it here. So we have this image right here, okay? So this image was downloaded to run our job, right? You can see the node in the node image here as well. And you can see the Docker image here also, right? But now here, the Docker PS basically tells us that, there was a particular container that was running. So which means this container was used to execute our job. And the moment the job was done, the container was what? Was discarded. Do you understand that now? So basically, we are running every job in as a container. And as soon as the job is done, the container is what? Discarded. So that will help to reduce, all right, what we have on our system. So which means we are not running those jobs directly on our runner, but basically using Docker containers to run them. And then once the job is done, the container gets, all right, discarded. And that is really the way, all right, to go. Okay, so the command that you see here basically just means that there's an error here. I mean, if I go back to my app, all right, and I say docker run. So here, if I say docker run nginx, for example, right? So if I say docker run nginx, right? Let's see what that would do for us. Okay, so let me clear my screen. All right, so let's do git commit -am, all right, and then we just basically testing. All right, nginx image. Okay, and then you do docker push. Okay, so now let's go back to pipeline and let's see, all right, what happens with this job. So the pipeline has been triggered. All right, so let's see what happens now. Let's see if the build will succeed or the build will fail. All right, so let's take a look at what happens. Okay. All right, so the run test has succeeded. All right, so let's wait and see what the build image would, what will happen with the build image, right? So let's see what happens with that. If it fails or if it's going to pass this time around. All right, so let's wait and let's see what happens now. Of course, when you do Docker run, the first thing that happens is if the image is not present on your system locally, all right, what happens is that the image is pulled, all right, and then the Docker container will start, all right, basically. So that's what happens. So you can imagine, why this is taking time like this, all right. But then what we want to see is if it will succeed or if it will fail. All right, so let's take a look at that and let's just hold on for this to happen and let's wait and see, right? You can actually click on the job actually, all right? You can click on the job and see, what is going on with your job. Now you can see that it's actually working, right? You can see here, okay, that is building up, all right? You can see, look at that, all right? Nginx image was pulled locally. You can see the container here. So our job is running inside of this, all right, container. And then the Nginx image is being pulled. All right, so it's telling us starting worker processes. All right, I mean, something is going on right here, okay? So let's just wait for that to happen. So it has pulled the image, and then now it is trying to run, all right, the image, basically just to run the image as a container. So that means it's going to be running the image, right, more like a container inside of, all right, another container, basically, okay? So let's see what happens, all right, with that. All right, guys, now if you look at what we have here, it is still trying to start, all right, the nginx, all right, image, okay? Now, why do you think this is happening? I mean, now we can see that we have a docker ps command working, all right, and then we're able to pull the nginx image as well. Now, the reason why this is taking forever to build is, all right, to start rather, is because we are trying to run, all right, a container inside of another container. Now, why that is a possibility, all right, but for our own specific use case, that may not work because basically what we want to do is to use the Docker executor to build Docker images, to push Docker images, not to run Docker containers. Because every job that your executor will run inside of a container, basically. right? And when you want to start your applications and all of that, you are not expected to start your application inside of another container. Now, while I said that is also a possibility, but in our own use case, that would not already work. And that is why this is taking forever, all right, to run. Okay, so I just thought to share that with us. I mean, I just allowed us to see this, all right, to take our time to see it and to see that, all right, this is not something that you would use, all right, in a work environment or in a production environment, all right. Basically, what you would do is to use your Docker executor to build Docker images, push Docker images into the repository and deploy the images, all right, onto your production server, not to run your Docker images as a container inside, all right, of the Docker executor. Okay, so that is basically what is going on, and that is why this is not working. All right, now in the next video, we're going to start by building our project. All right, we're going to run some tests, all right, build our applications, all right, and then see how we can deploy our application on AWS.